people of Iowa, introducing legislation to move federal agency headquarters out of Washington, D.C. and closer to the people that they serve. One example of that is the Swamp Act. It's a bipartisan bill that I introduced with Jared Golden from Maine. I also am working to improve transparency at the Small Business Administration to ensure that small business owners have a clear picture of what is out there for disaster relief assistance. That is called the SBA Transparency Act. I introduced that. It has a Senate companion with Senator Tim Scott. And I've reintroduced bipartisan, bicameral legislation with several of my colleagues to fix real problems like onshoring our food supply chain, boosting our domestic manufacturing, and ensuring as well that the CCP, Communist Chinese Party, does not control any part of our food supply chain. That is critical because food security is national security. I was also proud to vote for President Trump's one big, beautiful bill, a generational investment to secure our borders. Continued tax relief for working Americans. I can't believe you would boo tax relief for working Americans. This bill is promises made, promises kept in action. Iowans overwhelmingly voted for President Trump's America First agenda, ending illegal immigration, preventing dangerous criminals and drugs from entering our communities, cutting wasteful spending, and unleashing American energy. That's what this bill does. And when Democrats were in the majority, you know what they passed? They passed legislation to make you report $600 transactions on Venmo and wanted to hire 87,000 more IRS agents to come after you and target you. I think that's wrong. And they added trillions of dollars in new spending that drove up inflation, which is a tax, a real tax on everybody.
And what
we are working to provide tax relief for working Americans. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle will continue to lie about this bill being a tax cut for the wealthy. But did you know that the top tax rate for earners was not changed in this bill? That bill did not change the top tax rate at all. We wanted to target the tax relief in this bill, additional tax relief, to those who need it the most, the middle class. So what we did do was add provisions like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, as well as enhanced child tax credit for working parents. Social Security programs cannot be changed through the budget reconciliation process, but we did add tax relief for seniors through deduction of almost $4,000 from their taxes if they make less than $75,000 or $150,000 financially. We also made small business tax relief permanent and will prevent the death tax from hitting small family farms in Iowa. We have the backs of working Americans who are keeping our country running every single day. And just to put it into perspective, the average taxpayer in Iowa's 2nd District, where we are standing, would see an increase of 25% taxes if the tax cuts were not extended, that were passed in 2017. A family of 4 making the average of median income in the district, $69,384, would see a $1,358 tax increase if the Trump tax cuts were allowed to expire later this year. So that's about 7 weeks of groceries for a family of 4 on average. So simply put, anybody who voted no on that bill last week also voted to allow your taxes to go up. And I wasn't going to take that vote. I voted yes for those reasons. My philosophy has always been that it is your money, it is not the government's money. And I will keep fighting to protect American families over illegal immigrants. From the border security perspective, it will help to secure our border permanently by funding the largest deportation effort in history and disincentivizing illegal immigration. We are going to be providing funding in this bill for at least 1 million annual removals. And by giving our Border Patrol agents the strategic advantage that they need, I think it sends a very clear message to the cartels, the traffickers, the murderers, any other illegal alien criminals that they have no place in the United States and they need to go back to their home country or go to jail. This would not have been possible without President Trump's leadership, and I look forward to working with him to make sure we're getting this transformational legislation signed into law. And you know those border numbers that I just cited? The President spoke to that actually in his address to Congress this year. We didn't need new legislation to fix the border. We just needed a new president. Too often in Washington, decisions are made by federal bureaucrats who have never balanced a small business budget, stepped foot on a family farm, or faced the unique challenges of rural communities. And as a member of the House Appropriations Committee, I've advocated to slash wasteful spending while successfully ensuring that Iowa receives resources for targeted investments such as child care centers, clean drinking water infrastructure, and affordable housing, while working to end abuses of taxpayer dollars and end overreaching mandates. At a recent chamber event that I was at in Lynn County, I received overwhelmingly positive feedback about the work that DOGE is doing, and my hope is that we absolutely need to be cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, and we can sustain key programs and investments that Iowans and Americans care about if we do that. And no one has sought to tackle this difficult task head on and see it through until we had President Trump in office. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples that I think as taxpayers we should be really upset about, because I know I certainly am. His administration discovered over $300 million of SBA loans have been given out to individuals under the age of 11. These are SBA loans, business loans, going to people under the age of 11, and over $300 million to people over the age of 120. The goodness that DOGE has done is they've exposed all of these loopholes that adversaries are using to go after these dollars. Guess what? These SBA loans are not being repaid because they're being taken by people in Russia, China, and other countries. And I think everybody can agree we should be stopping fraud, especially if it's being taken advantage of by our adversaries, and no loans should be going out to babies or the deceased. DOGE has also exposed outrageous spending, like $70,000 for the production of a DEI musical in Ireland, $2.5 million for electric vehicles, not here in the United States, but in Vietnam, and $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, to just name a few.
Sounds good.
The other thing I think that's important about DOGE that they're doing is it's not just about finding the waste and the fraud, it's also about efficiency at the heart of what DOGE is doing. And they're working to improve technology efficiencies to ensure the government isn't paying for unused office space and ensuring every dollar is able to go as far as possible. Did you know that the federal government loses between $233 billion and $531 billion? Yes, that is billion annually to fraud due to inadequate data and outdated systems. A company could never run this way. So this is absolutely unconscionable to American taxpayers, and swamp bureaucrats were not even batting an eye. Even Democrats like President Obama and Speaker Pelosi have admitted that we need to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. The difference now is we're actually doing it. And President Trump and Republicans in Congress and the Senate are committed to following through. Last month, I introduced the Protecting American Taxpayers by President Trump's recent executive order to improve the Treasury Department's ability to screen for improper payments and fraud. And I will get to your questions in just a few minutes. I'm giving an update, and then I will take your questions. That's why I'm here today. That's what I've done 44 in person. So just be patient, and I'll be answering your questions shortly. Last month, I mentioned I introduced that piece of legislation, and I do believe that ending improper payments should be a bipartisan issue. We should all be able to get behind legislation that ensures that tax dollars are not improperly paid out and sent down the drain. The American people, you, deserve transparency and accountability there, and I hope that we can make this policy permanent through my legislation. As you know, I came to Congress serving in the minority, and we were in divided government for several years. And I am proud of what we were able to accomplish for Iowans, for you, in those circumstances, and my governing philosophy has not changed. I will always work with anyone who will work with me to deliver for Iowa and do what is right for our communities. And I think if you look at the bills that I've already introduced to this Congress, that is abundantly clear. I am focused on results and getting things done for you. Before we open it up for questions, really shortly here, I want you all to know we have 3 offices in the district. These are solely focused on helping you to navigate issues with the federal government. So troubles that you might be having with the IRS, visa, passport issues, dealing with FEMA. People might not immediately think, hey, we should call Congresswoman Hinson's office to navigate through these problems. Maybe you're waiting on a refund check from the IRS. That's your money, right? So our office is working to help get those dollars returned to you. So our office stands ready to answer those questions for you, help you work through those challenges that you might be having related to the federal government. We do run a customer service division here in the district, and that is what we are focused on. Again, I bring your feedback and your perspective with me to DC, and I think we can all agree sometimes the conversations in Washington don't reflect the conversations we have at our kitchen tables here in Iowa. We're common sense people here, and I think the disconnect can be real and frustrating. That's why I'm trying to bridge that gap and be your voice in Washington. So I will continue to travel to every corner of the district, do these town halls, meet with businesses, with manufacturers, with healthcare workers like we're going to do this afternoon, meet with our military as we send off soldiers this week from our district. I'm going to work very, very hard to make Washington, D.C. to continue to run more like the great state of Iowa. So to take your questions today, I would just ask a few things. I'm going to have my staff go around. We have 2 people who are going to be running around the room with microphones so that everybody can hear you. What I would just ask is that you raise your hand, and they'll kind of go through the room, state your name and where you're from, and then I will answer as many questions as we can get to in this time we have together. So go ahead, and we'll start with Roy, right here on the aisle, the purple shirt.
My name is Randy Cleesner.
Randy, where are you from?
Oh, I'm from Norcast. And first of all, thank you for your service. Even though we differ on a lot of different things, I appreciate the time you take. Congressional Republicans, and I believe this is true, Congressional Republicans slipped a little notice measure into their big massive bill that you just voted for. It would make it exorbitantly expensive to sue the Trump administration, potentially invalidating dozens of injunctions that have halting the White House actions and sucking even more power out of the nation's courts. I have watched Donald Trump sign executive orders that are illegal and are against our Constitution. I have watched federal judges block those executive orders. I have watched Donald Trump berate and condemn those judges. What are you going to do to protect these judges from Trump's vindictiveness?
Access to the courts is important no matter who is the president. I really believe that to be true. And what we don't want to see is no matter who is in the office that people don't have remedies for those lawsuits. I think that is important that they have access to the courts, and we've certainly seen that happen this administration and in the prior administration as well. What I don't want to see happen are activist judges that can put a stop to policies for the entire country. If you look at how the federal court system is designed, it's actually designed so that you should have injunctive relief only for the audience right before you. And I actually went and met with our federal court district judge here in the Northern District of Iowa to talk through this because I wanted to know how the process worked better. So I just want to make sure that we're not seeing activist judges, no matter who's in office, put a stop to policies that the executive branch has the ability to do. So what we've passed is actually through the House is a bill called. I'd like to answer Randy's question if that's right. Thank you. What we have passed is it's called No Road Rulings Act, and this would enable the system to go back to the way it was, probably 20, 30 years ago. I think Daryl Ised is the sponsor of the bill. I'm happy to get you a little bit more information on it if you want to follow up with our office. But what it is designed to do is go back to, for some of these other injunctions that we've seen, a 3-judge panel so that we don't end up in these situations where people are trying to direct their ire at one specific judge, if that makes sense. So a panel of judges would help make that process, I think, a little bit more efficient and provide that relief more quickly. If there are going to be lawsuits like this happening, we want them to move fast so we can have certainty and make sure that people can do their job if it's constitutional. I think that's really important. Next question, come down here in the front, right into the black shirt right there.
Hi, thank you for...
Good morning.
Name and where you're from.
Oh, sorry. My name is Dick Larson. I'm from Walker, Iowa. I'm going to read my question just to respect your time. I'm a lifelong Iowan who grew up on a family farm. I attended college in Iowa, worked for a large corporation for 27 years, and retired early from executive leadership to return to my farming roots. I'm a self-employed farmer and consultant and purchased my health insurance through the ACA marketplace. The recent legislation passed by the House will result in at least a $4,000 tax increase for my family of four. This, along with an 88% increase in my homeowner's insurance, an 86% increase in my farm building and equipment insurance, will increase costs for my family by $10,000 in just 1 year. Insurance costs are killing Iowans. I've made multiple requests to your office to provide more information on how you're working to preserve the ACA and not raise taxes for Iowans like me. To date, you have not responded. Several weeks ago, a small-town self-employed stylist was cutting my hair, and she said to me, quote, "I would not be able to do this if I couldn't get health insurance through the ACA." I'm an Iowa taxpayer who owns property in 3 counties, as well as 2 small businesses. I'm our local school board president. I'm a church trustee and donate time, gas, and equipment to mow our 6-acre church campus every week. I'm one of your constituents. I'm about as Iowan as you can get. Quite frankly, you owe me an answer today.
Because we do try to respond to everybody. We had someone actually come to one of my last town halls who said they hadn't got a response, and I followed up, and it turns out they had responded to him 3 times. He just hadn't maybe communicated back. So I just want to make sure that before I check, I just want to make sure that we do that, because we do try. I do pride myself on customer service and making sure we're responding to our constituents in a timely fashion. I've heard from many people about insurance rates and insurance denials, right, especially with severe weather and how challenging that is. We are doing some work with, we're reaching out to Senator Hawley's office. I don't know if you followed some of the things that he's been talking about in response to the recent severe weather. Actively following what he's doing there, because I do believe transparency is important, and that is going to help, I think, lower costs and premiums for insurance, as you mentioned, for many of your farm buildings. We do have a lot of severe weather here in Iowa. We want to make sure that you have access to that coverage and that it is affordable. We have seen those coverages go up massively in the last several years, and some of that is due to the number of disasters we've experienced, and I think that is important to acknowledge in that bigger conversation. As far as the ACA and health insurance, I think the most important thing is trying to figure out a way to lower premiums. We have to do that. Access to prescription drug costs is one of the biggest drivers of health insurance costs. We are working actively on PDM reform, which will help to lower costs for everyone. We need to make sure, as we take a look at access points, a lot of the conversations in the last few weeks have been about Medicaid. And I want to be very clear, too, as we're having conversations about Medicaid and ACA, we want to make sure people have access to providers, no matter what their zip code is. And I think the most important thing is, if you look at the bill that we actually passed, it is designed to provide continued tax relief to people in that middle class bracket. Again, I have a fact sheet, and I think my staff actually has it. We're happy to hand those out if you have questions. But yes. Well, I would be happy to have a follow-up conversation with you about your individual circumstances and how you have your business set up, because everybody's circumstances are different. And when I take a look at a bill like this, I try to figure out how we can do the most good for the most people and provide the most relief, and that is exactly what I have tried to do. Okay, let's go over here in the aisle. The lady with the Iowa. Oh, I guess you're standing in the back. Okay, I can't see all the back. Okay. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ben. I was born in the sewer of Washington, D.C. After college and graduating in 2016, I moved out here because the cost of living in that lunatic asylum was out of control. First, I want to commend you for coming out and speaking with us. Now, my question pertains, and this is something we Americans are fickle on, is our short-term memories. In the 9/11 Commission report, one of the greatest concerns that enabled the 9/11 terror attacks was the fact we did not control our borders. It is my understanding that the United States Coast Guard is about to go through a massive expansion, which I support, because they're not going to get across the river, they're going to get across from the sea or from the air. How big of this expansion will there be, and can we get the dollars to support it without expanding the debt?
Well, and that's exactly what we're working on, Ben. Thank you for that question. I think I serve on Homeland Security Appropriations Committee, which oversees the U.S. Coast Guard. And I don't know if you all knew it, but we have a Coast Guard installation right on the Mississippi River as well. So we have a river buoy tender that is based in Dubuque, Iowa as well. So funding the Coast Guard is very important to me. We actually had the Commandant of the Coast Guard in before our committee just a few weeks ago, And one of the things that I was struck by were the number of interdiction reports that they are now talking about, right? Because we have secured our southern border more so than has ever been before, those cartels, the traffickers, the adversaries are looking for other methods to get those products and people into the United States. So that's where the Coast Guard becomes absolutely critical. They said that they've seen massive increases both at the San Diego sector over Southern California, as well as in the Caribbean, right? So they're seeing things come in that way. So funding the Coast Guard is absolutely of importance. I think what we need to do is take a look at all of our DOD expenditures. I know Coast Guard is housed under Homeland Security, not under DOD technically, but we need to be taking a look at how all of our armed forces are working together, how we can continue to be as efficient as possible with those dollars so that we can actually execute on the mission at DOD, which is stopping the criminals and the bad guys and defending and keeping the United States safe. So we haven't had discussions about the actual dollar amount yet. We're working on drafting our bill right now to see what we're going to be able to afford to do. But under Homeland Security, we have not only Coast Guard, but we also have CBP, ICE, a number of other agencies. Secret Service is also housed under Homeland Security appropriations. So we're working on figuring out where all those numbers need to be so that we can make sure we're executing on the mission of keeping our country safe. Thank you. Yep, go ahead, Brandon.
Hi, I'm Dave Omling from Boston. Was going to ask about how many 10-year-olds and 12-year-old criminals have been deported by ICE, but my question is, you slipped in two clauses in the big, beautiful bill. One is to allow Trump to void elections that he feels he can, and the other one was to avoid contempt of court judgments. Why were those put in there?
Well, I think that kind of follows up on what Randy said. Our whole point is to make sure we don't have activist judges who are holding back, no matter who is executed on that agenda. I think, Dave, the other thing to that point is I want to just comment briefly on election integrity, because I do believe that's important. And one of the things that we have learned a lot in Iowa is that elections can be very close. So to the point I made earlier about making sure that illegal immigrants are not voting in our elections, that's been a priority of President Trump's and of mine, to make sure that we can protect the integrity of each and every single one of your votes. Okay, I just want to answer to the question, and I'll move on because we've got a lot of other people who want to hear answers to their questions. So go ahead, Ray, you have another one right there. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Bev Connor from Edgewood, and I'm here on behalf of my 8 siblings. Our 90-year-old dad just passed away April 4th. He was on Humana, Medicaid, and eventually was switched to the wonderful Molina program, which is one of the 3 MCOs available. He's only been hospitalized a few times in his 90 years of life with pneumonia. He's lived at home. My mom passed away 16 years ago. Dad fended for himself, cooked for himself, cleaned his house for himself. Somewhere along the line, he got switched over to the Molina program. They are now asking for estate recovery for $72,000. My dad lives in the little town of Greeley, Iowa. The recovery amount previous to the Molina charges was $3,600. About a year of the Molina participation, it went to $68,000 plus. The monthly capitation varies from $4,000 to $5,000 per month for the coverage. The Molina revenue in 2024 was $40.65 billion. $40.65 billion in 2024 alone. The profits, $251 million. They are a Fortune 500 company. Where do you stand on this?
Just a second. We redone Dad's house to make it all handicapped to keep him home. And with them wanting to recover so much of this money, the money is not there to pay the people that done this. The state is after that money. So we saved them how much money by not putting him into a home and redoing it to keep him home. There's a lot of senior citizens, so pay attention to this. Melina comes in not knowing my dad didn't know that. It's $5,000 a month, whether you use the system or whether you do not use the system. It's just like an insurance. Your car insurance. If you don't get in a car accident, you don't use it. My dad would have never signed up for something that would cost him $5,000 a month, not knowing you'd ever use. There 8 of us kids will pay a $300 premium a month if that's what we got to do to chip in. They slipped this Melina thing in without even the people knowing that, the senior citizens, and that needs to change. It started out at $188,000 is what they wanted for the last year of our dad's life. And they now will settle for exactly what his property is worth. Too coincidental.
Well, Bev, and to your siblings, thank you so much for coming out today and sharing your story. Number one, I think that is important. Maybe I read about it in the paper. I think I probably did, if that was the same story that was covered in the paper. I know that Melina is through the state Medicaid program, which the federal dollars flow to the states, and the states administer Medicaid. That's how that works, right? So I'm happy to help you network with Melina, that we can definitely work on a casework claim for you and what's happened with your dad. So if you reach out to our office, that's what we do. We help people navigate through that or connect you with the state level partner that you would need to have that conversation with. What I think is important in this bigger conversation is, you're right, the cost of this program and these programs are skyrocketing. That is at the heart of what a lot of the changes we've been trying to make are. We have a lot of people who are enrolled in many states at Medicaid. We have to pay, so we're then sending money to states, and then they're paying for the same person to be enrolled in 2 states. I mean, I think that's a huge problem, and that is also helping to drive up costs of healthcare. So when you talk about that staggering number, right, that's a huge problem. If these costs are careening forward uncontrolled, that's not a responsible use of taxpayer money, and then abuses can happen. So happy to have another conversation. I'm sorry you lost your dad. I know that's, well, sometimes when we make a phone call, you'd be amazed at how quickly they respond. So we're happy to help intervene. A number of my casework teams. So where are you from, Bev, again? Where are you from? Edgewood. Okay. So we have our case. I have another town hall that I'm going to go to this afternoon, so I've got to get on the road. But we have Roy, he's in our Dubuque office, and he works on casework. And then Reagan, who's also here today, is, okay, good. So just keep me updated on that. Reagan keeps me apprised of that. I get a weekly casework update of all the casework that we're doing in the district and the problems, the cases we're solving for people and where things stand. So we will be happy to work with you on that. And certainly I understand the challenges that your family is facing, and it's terrible. So. Well, again, that's where we need to make sure we're making sure these programs work for people who are on them and people who need those benefits, people like your dad, right, who needed that access to care. But we want to make sure that across the board, whether it's the ACA or Medicaid, that these premiums are not bankrupting people at the same time. So that's what we're working on. So, Roy, go ahead with, and he'll hold the mic. Thank you. Go ahead and say your name and where you're from.
Mary Jacobs, Elkader. I understand that congressional work retreats are conducted by both parties. I understand that you went 7 days after inauguration to the Trump National Doral Golf Club for a work retreat. Do you know how many retreats have been held by either party on property owned by a present or former president? And how does our taxpayer money going to his golf resort not go against the emoluments clause of the Constitution?
I think the most important part my partners take their members off-site to have discussions that you can't have in Washington, D.C. It's hard to get everybody to show up at a meeting in D.C., let alone. So some of the meetings are held off-site. Specifically, that one was because of the security threats specific to President Trump. I saw the glass that they had to haul in for the room that he had to stay in when he came to speak. It's quite an ordeal to have a full Secret Service detail, and when you look at the money that the Secret Service has already spent because they know that property, we have to look at that cost as well, because when they come into some of these properties to do their pre-checks and pre-scans, and they're on site usually several days ahead of time, it actually saves money for taxpayers if it's at a property that they already know. So in that case, due to the threats on President Trump's life, which they are very, very real, I think everybody in this audience knows, he's had, I think, 2 that almost came to fruition in the last year before he was even the president again, and many of our adversaries do not want to see him be successful, and so we need to make sure that, again, no matter who is the president, that they are kept safe by the Secret Service, and that, I believe, was the rationale behind that specific location. But I think, again, finding a place where and I'm happy to look into the specifics and follow you up, but I think that legally we would not have held an event in a place that violated the law. I can guarantee you that of our importance in following the law. Unlike the previous administration that chose not to enforce the laws we had on the books at the southern border. Roy, go ahead. You want to come up here in the front? How about the aisle here? Coast Guard, right? Is that okay? So speaking of our Coast Guard question, there we go. Sir, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Neil Kenius. I live in Manchester. As a matter of fact, I used to live here in Decorah. I'm a retired federal employee. But how I got to that was I was injured in the service. I had 10 years. Then I went through the Veterans Administration, and they put me through to get my biology degree, and I was able to work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, where I retired from. So I'm very well aware of federal governments and what they do for veterans. Okay? And I'm not for this doggy stuff. To me, that I work for the federal government, and I know what they stand for. I have a family that my sister, she works at the VA hospital, and she's a nurse practitioner. And you guys cut funding and her staff, okay? For
Actually,
this DOGE
the funding for the VA has not been cut. That's a complete lie. And
well, according to her, yeah.
It's not been cut, though. I can guarantee that.
Well, her hospital staff has been cut, and she has 1,000 patients. And, just in my knowledge of my service to this country, I have 30 years in. And this DOGE program, no, it's not efficiency. It's just not. To me, it's just, I understand that, working with the program, it needed some work, for efficiency, as you well know. But you don't take a billionaire as Musk and go in there with a chainsaw. No. And I'm not only speaking for myself, but I'm speaking for all the veterans, all the federal workers that are out there.
Well, I think having a strong federal workforce is really important.
We don't need a billionaire as Musk running our country, these oligarchs.
They're hoping to make recommendations for the executive branch and for Congress, which obviously has Article 1 authority, which is power of the purse. I believe in that very, very much so. I'm on the Appropriations Committee, the committee that is tasked with making sure we are being responsible with government funding. I don't think we should be funding Sesame Street in Iraq. I don't think we should be funding male circumcisions in Mozambique. I don't think we should be funding transgender operas in foreign countries. I think we should be funding the VA. We should be funding research at institutions like the NIH, who are working on making sure that we can find the next cure for cancer. I want to make sure that dollars are going where they should be going, not continuing woke priorities of the previous administration. The other thing that's important about DOGE, and I think that Elon Musk came in and helped to join and lead a team of people who are actively working to find this waste, fraud, and abuse every single day. You should, because some of the things that they are discovering every single day would make your skin crawl. I think I gave you just a few of those examples today. But National Institutes of Health, an agency that we want to see continue to fund good health research, for example. When they have dozens and dozens of different departments, they're not sharing research data. That's an inefficient way to do business, and who knows, we might have missed out on the next great cure or the next great research discovery. So we need to make sure through those efficiencies that we're making improvements. The other thing that I think is important, and it's work that our Senator Joni Ernst has done with the DOGE caucus in the Senate, but they've uncovered hundreds of thousands of credit cards that are being used inappropriately. And I think that's egregious when you're seeing the charges that are coming up on some of those credit cards. Exposing that waste, fraud, and abuse is what we should be doing, and that is at the heart of the intent of DOGE. Okay, let's see. Who's our next question from? Where's Reagan's back there? Okay, Reagan. Sorry, I can't see all the way back in the lights. Go ahead.
Hi.
Name and where you're from, please.
Linda Kramer. I'm from Dubuque, but I'm speaking for my friend Nicole today. She's also from Dubuque, and she has difficulty speaking. I'm severely disabled. I use an electric wheelchair and only have partial use of my left arm. I'm deaf in one ear, and my brain can no longer process sound normally. I have to wear an eye patch over one eye, and my speech is damaged. I tell people basically that I'm a functioning mind trapped in a non-functioning body. I started getting sick when I was a teenager and had to have extensive brain surgery 5 times at 29. I've since had more surgeries to attempt to keep my hand function and the use of my eye. I'm 41 now. And though I attempted to go to college, my disabilities were too severe, so I have no skills. I've had to stay isolated because my immune disabilities were too severe, so I have no skills. I'm sorry. I've had to stay isolated because my immune system is so bad. So the only thing I have to live on is the SSI, the Supplement Social Security Income Payment that I receive. I'm having to use what little SSI money I have more often now for groceries, despite having SNAP. And now both groceries and bills are both so expensive and getting worse. Medicaid is the only medical insurance that I have. And the only way that I have housing is through a Section 8 housing voucher. I am now truly afraid that when any of that gets cut, I have literally nothing else. And because I have so many physical disabilities, I won't survive very long without it. Nicole's question for you today. Without Medicaid, I'm condemned to death. But without a way to get my medications, it will be a slow, painful death. I want you to look me in my one good eye and justify your voting to condemn me to a slow, painful death.
Well, Nicole, thank you for being here today, and Linda, thank you for asking the question on her behalf. I appreciate you being here to help with your disability, and I appreciate you making the effort to come out here because I know how much effort that took today. I want to be very clear. There is a lot of fear-mongering about the bill last week and what passed. Medicaid needs to be protected for people just like you, Nicole. It needs to be there. Social Security, disability benefits need to be there for people like you who are in that situation, people who need it. The medically frail, if you look at the bill, are specifically exempted from work requirements in the new Medicaid changes. Caretakers of those who are disabled are also specifically exempted. And I think it's important as well, you mentioned Social Security benefits, those are important. I want to make sure they're there for you, for all the seniors in the room, for anyone who has earned those benefits and needs access to them. The Democrats in Congress know that this bill could not touch Social Security other than to change the tax so that seniors are paying less on their Social Security benefits. That's the only change we were able to make because of the rules, the Senate rules surrounding the reconciliation bill process. So when I say these things, it's if you actually read the bill, we have done everything possible to make sure that these programs are going to, number one, be efficient. We're rooting out the waste, fraud, and abuse that we need to get rid of in the programs. We're finding ways to get people back into the dignity of work, people who should be working, who don't have someone they're caring for, who aren't disabled, who are able-bodied adults who should be out working in the workforce if they're going to take a government benefit. Those are the changes that we've made in this bill so that people like you can continue to have access to the treatments and the medications that you need, Nicole. So if you do have any challenges accessing those benefits through individual case-by-case basis, please, Linda, make sure you're in contact with our office, or Nicole, if you can get in contact with our office as well. We are happy to help you navigate through any challenges you might be having. Thank you. Right in? Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, my name's Daryl Severson from Strawberry Point. One thing that I'm really concerned about is, I don't know if it's DOGE, doggy, or whatever you want to call it, but all these universities are being attacked because they feel that they're too liberal, I guess is the reasoning, but they've cut almost $2 billion in research. I've got a wife and 2 sons that have genetic eye disease that the University of Iowa is working on. And to tell those people, tell the University of Iowa that you don't get the money to do that might save their eyes because they're just on the verge of having transplants, and just so that the rich can get an extra tax cut is a crime. It's an absolute crime.
To what I said, sir, about the NIH and the inefficiencies in NIH, well, one of the things that I think is really important is making sure research dollars go to fund that next big cure. So when I talked about the inefficiencies of having that many different CIOs, different kind of businesses within a business, that's not an efficient model, and making sure research dollars are getting to actual researchers. So one of the things that we've tried to change so that more of those dollars do flow to researchers, there's a lot of administrative take from these universities on top of the research process. If you look at how those funding streams are broken down when they're granted to universities, a lot of that money is taken for administrative overhead. What we are trying to do is cap the amount of that cost so that more of those dollars go directly to researchers. The other thing that is important there is, and so when you look at some of these other institutions, they're not complying with some of the requirements of executive orders, like letting men play in girls' sports, which I think is we're going to be sports that need to comply with those rules and executive orders. And the other thing that I think is important in this country right now is we have seen just an outbreak in anti-Semitism in this country. It's uncontrolled on many of these campuses. On many of these campuses. Just because they are not complying with this, if they're not going to comply and they're not going to follow through with that information, they shouldn't be getting federal money. They have giant endowments that these universities can use to help support their students and encourage more people to go. I believe in free speech on college campuses. I don't believe in hate speech. And there's a complete difference between what we're seeing enabled by these universities. So we're going to continue to hold them accountable because that's what accountability looks like. And we want all of our students to feel safe on campus no matter where they choose to go. Okay, let's go right now. Go ahead and then I'll go right back. Sorry.
My name is Adam Koresh. I'm a former resident of Elkader, current student at UNI, living in Cedar Falls. Representative Hinson, my question to you is related to the largest Medicaid cuts ever passed that you passed in the big beautiful bill, and states reps and senators like Jason Gearhart and Mike Clemish have pushed for with Senate File 615 requiring 20 hours a week to continue receiving benefits. My Senator Mike Clemish, the man that was up there with you sitting right there, was the floor manager for Senate File 615. Mike, I called the Senate at least a half a dozen times, leaving my concerns with the sweet old lady at the Capitol, and I emailed you. I never heard back from you once, not a call back or an email, leaving his constituents scared and in the dark worried about the future. My concerns with work requirements for Medicaid come with the vast amount of power that goes to the Director of the Health and Human Services to decide who is worthy of health care. I'm a college student currently receiving Medicaid benefits. I am going to college to become a teacher, entering what is hopefully my last year this upcoming fall. I'm a worker, and I have been since I was 14 years old, only stopping alongside the entire world in 2020. Next year, I'll be student teaching, where working is strongly discouraged to let students and classwork take my full attention. Under the current proposed Iowa legislation, students on Medicaid like me would have to beg to the Director of Iowa Health and Human Services to keep my health care, where I could then potentially receive a good cause exemption. I have only used my health care once, and that was to get the prescription for the glasses on my face. What holds me back from using my health care is the shame pushed by Republicans targeting Medicaid recipients as the people committing the waste, fraud, and abuse, when in reality, it is almost always going to be the providers, like your Republican colleague, Rick Scott, who oversaw his company, Columbia HCA, while it stole $1.7 billion from American taxpayers like us. While you decide that a kid getting a prescription for glasses to read in the projector in Spanish 101 is too much for the American taxpayer, your colleague Rick Scott gets to be a deciding vote in the Senate for my health care instead of sitting in a prison cell where he belongs for stealing almost $2 billion from us. My question to you, Representative Hinson, is if the bill came back to the House, would you support an amendment to provide exemptions for full-time students, and so college students like me don't have to be worried about losing my health care when I'm student teaching? And Mike Flemish, if you could respond back to my messages, I would appreciate that as well.
Thank you. Well, I do believe that it's important that you have access to health care as well, and especially low-income students, so I think that's really important. So I'm happy to have a conversation with my colleagues in the Senate and our senators to see if that's something we can take a look at. I'll happily have a conversation. Can I answer your question, Adam? If that's okay, I'd like to just answer. I think it's really important that people who are low income have access to health care, and so that is going to continue to be a priority. What I think is important about the vote we took last week is I want to put it in perspective, because you need access to that care, but we have finite resources to be able to devote to these programs that are continuing to escalate in cost. Even with our proposal, Medicare spending is going to go up about Medicaid spending is going up 25% in the next 10 years. We are anticipating growth in the program as well, and more people taking advantage of those benefits. But what we don't want to see happen are illegal immigrants receive those benefits when they should be going to someone like you. 1.4 million illegal immigrants were found to be receiving Medicaid benefits. 1.4 million. Not to mention, as I discussed earlier, there are a number of people who are currently enrolled in 2 states. They shouldn't be. And when we look at sending those dollars to state programs so they can properly administer and make sure people can get the care that they need, that's woefully inefficient, and I would consider that to be waste, fraud, and abuse that we should be changing. So I'm happy to have a conversation with both of our senators about this. I will see Senator Ernst, I think probably sometime tomorrow or Friday. I'll be happy to have a conversation with her directly about it. But again, I think the most important thing here to reiterate, and there is a lot of fear-mongering. It's an important issue to so many people, and I get that. All the people we've heard from here today, healthcare is a very personal and important issue. I think it's really irresponsible to have people out there lying about tax cuts for billionaires. The tax rate didn't change for billionaires. We are trying to retarget those resources to people like you and me. And I think that's really, really important. So, okay.
We got the last question over here. We got time for just one more.
Hey, Ashley, Justin Augustine, Haters Home for Me here. And while we're on the healthcare subject, one thing you were talking and bringing up with the gentleman from Walker was some of the work you're doing on prescription drugs, and I think you mentioned like PPM or something like that. Recently, we've made some changes on our employees' health insurances and stuff like that just to help combat the rising costs. We're honestly all in the same pool, the same boat collectively, so anything that you can do to help bring those costs down on your end of the world in Washington, D.C., I'd sure love to hear about that.
Well, thanks, Justin. Appreciate you coming out today, and thanks for what you do at Moina as well, a big employer here in the district. So I know you do so much to make sure your employees do have good access to benefits and health care, and I know you do a good job at recruiting people because of the benefits that you do provide. So thank you for that. We have tried to start tackling the immense increases we've seen in healthcare costs. Through COVID, obviously, we saw a lot of that cost drive up, and we needed to pay our healthcare workers to make sure that they were showing up because it was a very, very tumultuous time for our country. But we do need to take a serious look at, I think the most important first step is prescription drug costs and figuring out how we can lower those. We also need to be a healthier country, and I think that there's a whole initiative kind of focused on some of those priorities as well. But I think when you look at prescription drug costs, the PBMs have driven up the costs for those drugs. Many of them are generics, shouldn't be costing as much as they are. So we're taking a look at that whole spectrum along the way. We've passed legislation, I think, in the last Congress. I'm trying to remember the exact title. I think it was Lower Cost, More Cures Act, to help with more of the transparency that we need around healthcare across the board. So whether it's prescription drugs, programs like Medicaid, to make sure that we're actually exposing some of the waste. We want bad actors to be held accountable for if they are exposing the system or are fraudulently using the system. But we, again, want to make sure that healthcare is accessible no matter what your zip code is, whether you're in a big city or a small community like Elkader. So actively tackling a lot of those issues, and thank you for asking the question. And thank you, everybody, for coming out today. I'm pleased to be here and answer your questions, and if you have any other follow-ups, please reach out to our offices directly. As I mentioned, we have 3 in the district, 1 in Cedar Rapids, 1 in Dubuque, and 1 in Waterloo. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, hinson.house.gov, or follow us on social media as well. Thank you so much for coming today.
Questions on scripted.